which brings me to a topic that I wanted to discuss with you, which is the new policies around resting players, the new rules around end of season awards and all NBA in terms of games played. That one's really simple. We'll just say that real quick. You got to play 65 games. Unless you have a season-ending injury towards the end of the season, you get to 60, 61, 62, whatever. Voters can decide in that case if there's a season-ending injury. You also just can't play, sub in, play a game, sub in, play 5 seconds, and get credit for a game like Drew did so that he could get his bag for games played. And then the rule about resting players, I just want to go through this real quick, Zach, for the listeners, the viewers who don't have these things up. So the league now has a policy around resting players for nationally televised games. This is going
to help me too, because I don't like
teams cannot rest more than one star player for the same game. And this affects half the teams. Half the teams in the league have multiple star players. A star player is defined as someone who has been an all-star or all-NBA in the previous 3 seasons. This affects 49 players across 25 teams. Healthy stars cannot sit out nationally televised games or any in-season games.
In-season tournament.
In-season tournament games, correct. So, in this case, a little anecdotally, resting stars for back-to-backs becomes even more strategic. If you have a in-season game or nationally televised game, the star player is not going to rest for that. Maybe it's the first night of the back-to-back. Maybe it's the second night, but teams will be more strategic about that. Star player must be in the arena, visible to fans. This is the interesting one to me with this new resting policy, no long-term shutdown. So an example of that, Portland's not going to be in the playoffs last year. They shut down Dame to try to secure a top 5 pick in the draft, of course, end up with the number 3 pick. Not allowed to do that anymore. There's major fines around this. $100K the first time, $250 the second time, $1.25 million for a third grievance of this, and $1 million more for each subsequent fine. So in theory, if you did it 5 times, it cost you $3.25 million the 5th time you did it. There's obviously, Zach, a lot of ambiguity around what is healthy, right? Star players know their bodies. Nagging injuries pop up here and there. All of this to say, with the rules around the end of season awards, if you want to win Defensive Player of the Year, All NBA, MVP, all that stuff, got to play 65 games, and the rules around resting star players, do you think any of this will matter? Do you think there's going to be actual actionable items that teams take and that players take that we're going to see more guys play in the 70s? We're going to see less guys sitting out nationally televised games. Like, do you think this is going to matter for the overall regular season product?
I do. I think more teams, like I can tell you, like the league has already gone through with every team. Let's look at your schedule. Okay, here's an example of where this could come into play. Here's a back-to-back, exactly like you mentioned. Okay, notice the second game is on national TV. The first game isn't. Like, you might want to start planning now 3 months in advance for how you can rest your guys for these purposes. So I think it will a little bit. And I do think we're going to have some case. So they've set up this committee of independent physicians, right, who are going to have the right to review your internal data about why this player missed a game, what his health situation is, and then make a ruling of like, was this a legit health-related thing, or are you trying to skirt the resting rules? I think that's going to happen at least once or twice, and I'm very interested to see how that proceeds. Like, do they get all the data? Like, that's personal, medical, private data. How much do you get? What is it, like, literally, what is the data? What is it 50 pages of the last 10 times this guy's visited the trainer? Is like, what is it? How is that ruled upon? But I do think it will have some effect. And the 65 game thing, the repercussions for that are going to be really interesting because it's going to benefit younger players when it comes to all NBA. And it's going to make, like, some guys are going to be eligible for the Supermax coming off their rookie contracts, that version of the Supermax and the 7 to 9 year Supermax, all that, the higher percentages, because I mean, we've already seen it with the forward position. The third team forward in all NBA the last 5 years has been like, well, LeBron didn't meet the game threshold. Durant didn't meet the game threshold. Kawhi never meets the game threshold. PG didn't. I think it's going to benefit younger guys who just play more.
It's really interesting because when I texted you about this yesterday, I feel like every time the league or the union, even I lived through this with our, union, and when we would negotiate things, I think every time we come up with a new rule, there's unintended consequences. And I think in some ways, I think overall, it's going to be a net positive because guys are going to play more. I think for a fan in particular, if you're not live in person at the game, it's going to benefit you because the star players are going to play in games. I called roughly 25 games last year. I probably had 6 or 7 of them where we get to the arena and it's like second night of a back-to-back. Shea's not playing. Oh, man, this is my one Shea game I get to call this year. All I fucking prepped for
and think about
Shea.
It. You have free courtside seats.
Yeah. No, it's the greatest job in the world. I'm
but
not
the air comes out of the balloon for everybody.
Yes.
I mean, you have a certain X percentage of fans are just there to have a beer and chill with their friends. But there are some friends, like, I've been looking forward all day to, like, this dude could pop off for 45.
But the thing I was going to bring up is what you brought up. And that is essentially the guys, the star players who already are on the Supermax, that they've already qualified for it. I don't think it's going to matter much to them, particularly the older players. And I do think an unintended consequence of this is that someone is going to meet the criteria for a Supermax extension, whether that is on their rookie deal or the 7 to 9 year Supermax. And he's going to get that because he's qualified. The team can't afford to lose him. TV rights hopefully are going up. And the natural reaction is going to be, so-and-so just signed for what? Because that always happens. That always happens.
Well, in general, everyone's just going to have to get used to what player salaries are. And, you know, we saw with Jalen, we see it all, like remember Mike Conley was the highest paid player in the NBA. And everyone's like, Mike Conley, biggest contract in NBA history. And like every year there'd be a new one. Now it's Jalen Brown. And right away, when Jalen Brown signs, you have Bobby Marks being like, wait till Luka makes $80 million a year. $80 million a year to play basketball. What is that? And I always go back to this. My dad taught me when I was real young, and the player salaries started to become a thing. Like, if someone made $5 million, $1 million, like, look, Zach, you got 2 choices. There's this big pool of money, and either the billionaire owner who you don't know and maybe inherited his money, maybe made it in some whatever, either he gets it all, or the players you actually like to watch play 82 times a year, they get more of it. Like, those are your choices. So, like, the money is there. And that's like that messaging from the union is going to be important because there are going to be people who are like, so-and-so, even you saw with Devin Vassell, there were people on Twitter being like, I never even heard of that guy. He's making how much money? Devin Vassell? I'm like, yeah, Devin Vassell's good. And that money's going to be 15% of the salary cap in a few years.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes reframing. It takes some reframing.
But that's work. Like, that's work on all of our parts too. I
agree.